Bom dia, todo mundo. Hello, everyone. It is an honor for me to introduce the first panel of the day, featuring none other than Jorge Paulo Lemann and Professor Dan Shapiro. As we delve into this discussion, we're privileged to have insights from the two most distinguished figures in their respective fields. To start, please join me in welcoming Dan Shapiro to the stage, an expert in negotiation and conflict resolution, who I had the honor to have as my professor. Thank you.
Super. Bom dia, bom dia, bom dia, bom dia. Unfortunately, that is the extent of my Portuguese. Yes, but let me say that it is a tremendous, tremendous honor and thrill to be here with all of you today to celebrate Brazil, to think deeply about Brazil, and to learn from one of the eminent Brazilians. So let me give you, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start right now with a little bit of context, 3 or 4 minutes of background about what's going to happen, and then I'm going to invite up our distinguished interviewee today, Jorge Paulo Lemann. So the focus of our dialogue today is going to be on negotiation, but negotiation very broadly, looking at how to negotiate in business and in life. And to set the stage, I'm going to give you just a little bit of context and how I came to know Jorge Paulo. And then I'll formally introduce him and we'll move to an interview. So to start, how is it that a scholar on negotiation is sitting in front of all of you to interview one of the world's most eminent business leaders? And it all started with the students here at Harvard. And two in particular, I know him by Luis, but Bebeto, and Larissa is sitting over here as well. Almost 10 years ago, both of them were in a class I teach here at the university on negotiation and conflict resolution. And they came to me during office hours with a passionate belief in Brazil and how to continue to grow your beautiful country. And they said, we want to promote a movement in dialogue in Brazil. And our course was on conflict resolution, and we started imagining, in the mind or the words of Jorge Paulo, your philosophy as I understand it, they wanted to dream big. And from my perspective in the field of negotiation, that is what we need. And so we started having many, many conversations, envisioning what this Harvard-Brazil conference could look like, how it can most positively impact Brazil. And I went countless hours, and these students then, along with many, many other students over the years, including the spectacular leadership of the conference this year, have worked and built what I think is magic. The magic of this conference. And before we even go further, would you join me in just a huge round of applause to the students? As I understand it, this conference now has become one of the most impactful events about Brazil in the world. And that year, many years ago, almost a decade back, the students had invited me to speak to launch one of these Harvard-Brazil conferences and to set the tone of dialogue, of conflict resolution. And sitting in the front row was a gentleman with a striking presence, both, I felt, elusive and magnetic. He was leaning in and listening with deep respect. And I saw his eyes conveying strong resonance with these ideas of negotiation, of collaboration, of conflict resolution. And I could sense, I felt it, I could sense it at a very core level, that this individual believed deeply in the Brazilian vision, in the Brazilian dream, and in the Brazilian potential. And that man, turns out, was none other than Jorge Paulo Lemann, the legendary business figure, investor. You all know him in many different realms, both for his business success as well as for his philanthropic work. There are many in this room, students who have been blessed with the opportunity for additional education thanks to the generosity of the Lemann Foundation, of the Lemanns themselves. And I must say that I am very grateful to have had this opportunity to get to know Jorge Paulo over the years, to have conversations, and to learn from his wisdom. And my hope is that today, all of us will have that opportunity as well. One final point of just our connection. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I published a book on negotiation, and I was enthused to spread it to Brazil. And Jorge Paulo was tremendously helpful in that process. In fact, he wrote a very powerful foreword to that book, talking about the importance of how Brazil must come together and unite, and how powerful it is as a society in unity. So today we have this wonderful and unique opportunity to learn from one of the most innovative business leaders. I'll be interviewing Jorge Paulo for about 30 or so minutes with some questions that have come to my mind. And then the last portion of our time, I'll be sharing some questions that have come from the students. We canvassed students and said, what questions do you have for Jorge Paulo? And so I'll be asking Jorge Paulo some of those questions as well. And with that, you did not come to hear me. Please join me in welcoming warmly Jorge Paulo Lemann. Great to see you. So first, how does it feel to be back at Harvard?
Oh, it's always nice to come back here.
Yes.
And yeah, it's nice to come back at an older age, not so worried about having to study or get good grades or pass. So it's nice to be here.
And you've certainly done a lot of the studying at Harvard over the years. Yes.
Yes.
So I'd love to make this somewhat of a journey over different elements, different parts of your career, your professional life, and so on, how your thinking has evolved over time. And I'd love to start at the start. You were born in Rio. Could you take all of us back to what it was like in your early years growing up in Rio? What was family life was like for you? Paint us that vision.
No, Rio was wonderful in those days. You had no security problems, which you have now. You could wander around pretty much wherever you wanted. I grew up on the beaches, playing tennis, so wonderful memories of those days.
Yes.
And when I go back to Rio now, and you have to be careful where you go and security, it's very sad.
Yeah.
But my youth was very good in Rio.
And when you look back at your youth, what are one or two things about your youth that you feel shaped you as a person?
I had a very powerful mother.
Powerful mother, yes.
My father died when I was 13,
Yeah.
so my mother was the main presence in my education, and she let me do pretty much what I wanted.
And was this a good thing, or?
It was good. It was good. I think it was important for me to be able to. I could go surfing anywhere or spearfishing, and I played tennis tournaments. And I'd go by myself, and she sort of let me do all those things. And I think it was important in my development that I had to fend for myself and solve things out early. I think children that are well off basically are too protected by their parents, and the parents want them to do well and want to help in everything. And my mother helped, but she let me find my own way also. So I think that was very important.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like that's something that you've kept with you over time in the business world and beyond. An independent thinker, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And you said tennis. And I think many of us in this room know about your acclaim as a tennis player. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you played at Wimbledon at one point as well.
Yes.
And I get the sense that for you, tennis and sports, it is a passion, but to me, it seems like it's more than just a passion for you. It seems like it's also been a teacher. And I'm curious to understand what you have learned through tennis, through sports, through surfing, what you've gained through that over the years?
I learned a lot through sports, and I surfed a lot. I joke that I learned more on the beach than I learned at Harvard, which is not really true, but anyway.
Yes.
And then tennis was always very important for me, and I learned how to compete. I learned that you only can be successful if you practice a lot. It doesn't work if you don't practice. I learned how to lose. You lose in tennis, and you have to figure out why you lost and maybe how you're going to do better next time. I learned how to read my opponents. You have to evaluate what the opponent is going to do. That helps you in life later on. I learned a little bit about taking risk also. I think risk is very important, and taking risks is something very important. And by doing a sport, you sort of practice taking risks in a controlled way, so you get a feeling for how much you can risk or cannot risk.
That's really interesting.
And so that helped me also. So it was very, very important for me.
And if you were advising students on that dimension of risk, how would you advise students starting a business, starting a company? Here's how you should think about risk. What would you say to them?
Oh, I think students in general don't take enough risk. And
You haven't met my kids yet.
And I find that people, the more they study, the less risk they take. Everybody knows this story. Sort of the best deal I ever made in my life was buying a beer company without knowing much about beer or beer companies and like that. And I bought it one afternoon, and then when I came back to my partners, I had a couple of guys who were PhDs from Chicago, from Harvard. These guys were all against the deal. And the other guy, the traders and the guys who were, buyers and sellers of things, they were all for it. So,
Interesting.
So
Risk.
yeah. So risk. So I found that people that study too much, they trust too much the books and the theory, and don't have a very good gut feeling for what works and doesn't work. And so that's my analysis of risk. I mean, you have to take some risk, and taking risk involves not only measuring everything and figuring out all the details, but having a feeling for what works. And that, like I said, in sports, you learn a little bit about that. How much can you really risk, or how much can't you risk?
So there's a risk in taking a risk, but there's a risk in not taking a risk as well.
Very much, yes.
And could you bring us for a moment back to that afternoon where you made that hefty decision, that risky decision? What did that feel? Did you immediately know this deal is going to move forward, or were you sitting at home or in a hotel room going, should I do this? Should I not do? What does it look like in your own gut, in your own mind, as you're making some of these very consequential financial and social decisions?
No, I had been thinking about it for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
So I had been working on the possibility that someday I might buy that company, which was Brahma, and so it wasn't very new to me. Yeah. And whereas my more prepared colleagues or partners were looking at spreadsheets and how much money we could make over time, etc. My judgment of this was Brazil is a hot country, young population. This company is badly run. And I looked around South America. All the rich guys were brewers. I didn't think they were better than we were. So that was, my analysis was rather simple and not very much based on cash flows and projections for the next 10 years and like that.
And simplicity is hard.
What?
Simplicity is hard. Simplicity does not mean simplistic. When you look at a potential investment, as an example, how do you try to find the essence of what the risks are, what the opportunities are? How do you think about that and bring it down to those simple kinds of questions?
Yeah. Well, you know, going back to my Harvard days, I came here. I wasn't prepared really to go to school here, and I had a lot of difficulty in the beginning. And I sort of developed a system to get through, to pass. And the system I developed was basically trying to figure out what the courses were about. And I would always figure out what were the 5 important things that I thought were. And then I studied thinking of those 5 things, and that I sort of developed a system for everything else afterwards, in terms of trying to figure out immediately what are the important things related to that subject. Yes. I also found out in my life that the guys I really admire and I think are very smart and like that, what always impressed me was that they always had a very clear idea of what is the essential thing of the question or the problems or like that. You know, they make it simple,
right,
or like that. And
that's brilliant.
so I sort of molded my getting through Harvard based on simply what are the essentials of this course and what are going to be the questions in the exams, etc. And then I use this for other things in life also. And
so you were training your mind and how to
train
find
my
the
mind to
essence.
go that way. And then in the companies we run, the companies always have 5 basic objectives. And everybody in the company has 5 basic objectives, and they are evaluated based on that. And so I try to transform this into a philosophy of making things work and making things simple, like that.
That's brilliant. You remind me, years ago I had a conversation with Howard Rafa, who you may have known. He was a business school professor, one of the founders of game theory. And I was asking him one day when he was at Harvard, how he learned. And he said at the end of a semester, I would write down 10 pages of notes, everything I learned from this class. And then I'd convert that into 5 pages and then to 2 pages. And by the end, it would be 3 points. Yours is 5. But I think it's brilliant because what do you remember 10 years down the road? The 3 or the 5. Say more about Harvard. You were here, and for all of you, where I don't mean to appoint any student. I know we have students from many schools, but where are the Harvard students who are here today? And I'm assuming most of you are here for 4 years. Jorge, Paulo, 3 years. You finished your degree your undergraduate degree in 3 years.
Yeah,
How did you do that?
That wasn't a good idea.
That wasn't a good idea. And could you share with all of us just a little taste? What was your experience like at Harvard?
You know, I arrived here and I was a surfer, tennis player, and
you're like the cool guy I always wanted to be friends with, but never could be friends with.
I hadn't studied that much before, and all of a sudden I had to study, and so it was tough to get going, and until I sort of figured out the system, and then it became easier.
Yes.
Like that, but I didn't like it while I was here, which is silly. I mean, you know, I could have gotten a lot more out of it. It took me some years later to figure out how important Harvard had been and how much I had really learned here about thinking longer term, about evaluating people, like that, so.
And I also understand you got in a little trouble here at one point at Harvard.
Yeah. Yeah, but everybody knows that story, sort of.
Check it out elsewhere. Yes. Yeah. No, so, and let's keep going then. You know, your philosophy, as I understand it, has a few basic, your leadership, business philosophy has a few basic components to it. And I was interested in digging a little deeper into some of them, starting with one that might seem self-evident, but I don't think it really is. You talk about dreaming big. What does that really mean to you? And how have you tried to live that philosophy?
Yeah, I didn't. Harvard helped me in dream big or bigger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was pretty short-term oriented. Where am I going to surf tomorrow and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you come here and you begin to think much longer term.
Mm.
You see that the world is much bigger than the vision you have, so you begin thinking bigger, like that. And so after I got out of Harvard, I had to scramble a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really work out very well at the beginning or like that. So,
Right.
And if you're scrambling, you can't think very big. You have to scramble, and so. But after a few years, things got better, and
Mm-hmm.
I began thinking bigger, longer term,
Right.
like that. And well, I think it's a good feeling to think big. I mean, you know, when I started the brokerage house in '71, I mean, the goal was to become the best stock market broker in Brazil. We didn't become the best stock market broker in Brazil because the stock market sort of collapsed after we went into the business, but we became the biggest bond traders, like that. We became maybe the biggest and best investment bank in Brazil at that time. And then moved on to buying companies. And when we bought the brewery, the idea was to be the biggest and the best in Brazil. We became that, and then the biggest and the best in the world, which took us a few years, but we got there too. So, and then philanthropic goals, and you know, there's half of the students that should be reading in Brazil can't read when they get to 6th grade or 7th grade. So in the foundation we have now, our objective is to make every Brazilian kid be able to read. And that involves working with some 3 million kids per year, trying to help them learn how to read better. And I think if they're able to read, they will be able to do so much more, you know, and that will be so important for Brazil. So,
Yes.
So anyway,
Dream big and make big. It's not just dreaming big, but it's pragmatic. Let's make big things happen.
Make it work.
Let's make it work. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And you know, I'm interested also. The tennis player wins. You won a lot. Every tennis player loses at points. There are the successes, and in a conversation we had not too long ago, you also said there are the non-successes. And we were talking, and I said, well, there's successes and there are failures. And what are some of the failures, and how do you do it? And Jorge Paulo said, I don't know if you don't call it failures, but he said non-successes. And that was so striking to me. Non-success to me suggests there's the opportunity to learn and to grow and to keep moving forward. But I'm curious from your perspective. The wins are easy. Companies grow, they have great moments, and they have challenges. How do you think through the non-successes? What's your approach in thinking and advice?
Non-success, you have to think about it and try to figure out why you were not successful.
Yeah.
And don't look at it as necessarily a problem, but a problem to be solved, and what can you do better next time to make it work better, and like that. So, you know, so it's like you lose a tennis match and you try to figure out why and how are you going to do better and like that. So, overall, I've been pretty successful, but the last 2 years were not very successful. We had a crisis in one of our companies. The first company we bought, the retailing company, had an accounting fraud there. So we have to deal with it, and we're dealing with it. It has 30,000 employees, so we got to try to save the company and like that. And problems are to be dealt with, and problems are usually an opportunity also. There's an opportunity to do something different, to learn, or to do better next time around.
Yes. So it's forward-looking.
Yeah.
What's the issue? What's causing the issue? And how do we move forward from this?
That's right.
Yeah. People. Another major element that I've heard you emphasize over time is the value of people at many different levels. Just generally, how do you think about the role of people and incentivizing, motivating people within the business context and much beyond, within Brazil even?
Yeah, when I started the brokerage house, didn't have much capital, didn't have any name or like that. And I figured that the only competitive advantage that I could have in the business was by trying to attract the best possible people to work with me. And at that point, I developed the partnership system in Brazil, which wasn't very well known. I attracted very good people by giving them the possibility of becoming partners in the business. And we spent a lot of time looking for good people, special people. And it made the difference. I mean, it made us be able to become the best investment bank in Brazil in those days. So we've always given a lot of importance to trying to attract the best possible people. We've made some mistakes with people also. We thought we were very successful in picking people, and so we tried to train everybody in-house. And in our system, so everybody was very similar. And then as the world began to change faster, as it is changing now, we found out that everybody we had was very similar and not very adaptable to a new world and a changing world or like that. So we had to change our system a little bit and attract more people from the outside. And because all the people trained in the same way, they didn't accept people who came from the outside, so we had to change that also. So people are very important to build anything you want to build. And in the beginning, it was much easier. When we had the brokerage house, we were 200 people, and you knew everybody, and you could evaluate everybody. But as we became bigger, we had to create systems to handle
The growth.
much more people.
And three, I'm thinking now back to students as well, who are starting businesses, entrepreneurs in this room. You have a very special relationship with your closest 3G partners. How does that actually work? So if you have students in this room who are saying, hey, let's come together, let's start an AI or tech company around this or that, and you have 3 of them working together, how do they make for an effective team that can grow and someday perhaps be, Jorge, Paulo, the second?
I had to learn there how to deal with people, and my original thought was that you should attract people who are like yourself, very similar to you, and in my first business experience, after I came back from Europe to Brazil, and I joined a group of guys, all Ivy Leaguers, and all Yale, Harvard, Princeton guys, and like that. We went broke in 3 years. I learned when you're putting a team together like that, you have to have different people, and different abilities and like that, and you have to try to make them work together. That's not always easy, but if the way to do it, I think good leadership is nothing more than having a dream that everybody participates, and even though they're different, they are contributing and being part of that dream. I think that's good leadership.
So, yeah, please.
And so I tried to do that in the companies I was involved with, and it also means you have to delegate quite a bit.
What's that like for you? You seem like a good delegator, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, but if you're delegating, you're running risks also. So it's
calculation.
Yeah, we've done very well with delegation, but there are problems here and there. People don't turn out exactly like you thought they would, or they react differently, or like that. So you have to adjust.
You have to adjust.
Always adjusting and learning.
And I'm curious about trust. Trust seems essential in the business world that you're working in, the businesses that you've built. And I suspect that it would become increasingly complicated, the issue of trust, as you've grown in prominence over many years, in wealth and so on. How do you build authentic relationships with people when they want they want money, or they want status, or connections? How do you build a real, authentic, trusting connection?
Now, trust is very important. And one rule that we've always had in our companies like that, if there's somebody that doesn't ethically fit in, you get rid of him right away.
Yes.
You can have different people, different colors, different ideas. But if somebody doesn't fit in ethically, done.
Yeah.
Get out. Get rid of him fast. But you still have problems.
Sure.
People change, and people so you may not even notice it, but they change, and so sometimes it doesn't work out. But that's the basic rule, but trust is very important. Now, I think in the bank, when we had the bank, we were a partnership, and we were always sort of 20 basic partners. But over the 30 years we ran the bank, we had maybe 100 partners who came through. And we so people came in and were partners for 10, 20 years and then left, or like that. And we never had a legal problem with any one of our partners. It was always very clear that we would trust them, they would trust us, and when the time to go was the time to go, and they would be treated fairly, like that. And so I think trust is very important in being able to build something. And I notice that many people that have tried to build partnerships, they don't make the rules clear enough before, and then they get in problems of discussing what the rules were. And so always try to have very clear rules.
Like what? Like what?
Well,
if you were going to start a partnership with someone in this room, what would that sound
if we don't get along, how are we gonna solve it?
Got it.
Or now, one of the things that I like very much, and you as a author of books on negotiation, I love clauses when you have a partner or a shareholder or like that, and you have very clear rules if you don't get along. And the rule I like the best is sort of it's a bomb. but in the sense that if somebody is unhappy, he can come to you and say, I am unhappy, I will buy you out, or I will sell out to you at a specific price. So if he will buy or sell at the same price, it's probably a fair price. And then the other side has the option to say, yes, I want to buy or I want to sell. Right. And then you get it over with, and you keep going, like that.
And you've agreed upon that before the tense
you've
moment.
agreed upon that, and you have, it's all put out, and so I think.
I love it. And I must say, I'm so surprised in the United States, as an example, the number of contracts that do not have a dispute resolution clause into their contracts, and they wait for a conflict to happen. Then they go, well, how do I deal with it now that I hate you? Yeah, and it's the worst time to be thinking about a process.
And then you go to court.
And you go to court.
Take years. And
the Harvard Law School loves this, but the rest, the lawyers love it, but not the rest of us. I am curious about another piece too. I just reflecting on the evolution of your experience, your journey. What drove you, let's say in your 20s? And what drives you now? Because I was talking with Jorge, Paulo, and Susanna and others, and they're flying to California. And here, you're constantly busy at the age of, am I correct, 84? Yeah. So the young 84, and you're still doing so much. What drove you in your 20s? What drives you now? Is it the same? Is it different? What brings you purpose in life?
I was always very active. I like being active.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm not the kind of guy, like I said, that reads a lot of books or like that. I'd rather be out there doing something and being active.
Yeah.
And that's part of my personality. So I was always physically very active and physically active in business and like that. I enjoy that, and I enjoy. I still play tennis at 84, and I still enjoy trying to improve this or trying to improve that, and trying to do things a little bit better. And in business also, I like. I just enjoy in trying to improve things and do things better.
Right.
And part of that is also I like helping others. I have 3,000 people I've given scholarships to and like that, and
many in this room. Yes.
And I think that's part of life is if you can help make other people better, and they will help other people become better. It creates a better world.
Yes.
And it creates a world which is trying to improve all the time and do things better. And that's
wonderful. So it's really a service-oriented mindset, how to help make the world better, help people move forward with education and so on, like you've talked about. Yeah, no, that's great.
And in business, the same. I always felt that the people that were working with me, if I can give them a better opportunity, if I can help them do a little bit better or like that, that is good for the business and for the world.
Yes. Let me move to student questions now. So these are questions that have been submitted by some of the students from the Boston area, and they're all wonderful questions. We're not going to have time for all of them, but let me try and get a few in. So first, if time as a student is our only currency, how do you suggest we spend it to get the best return on our investment?
Time as a student?
So yes, if time is my currency, how do I best make use of that time in order to get the most out of my investment? What's your advice to students on how to prioritize their time, how to think through time?
Well, I think studying itself is good, but I would try to relate it to something towards reality. In other words, I don't like the guys who go to college and then immediately they go to business school and they're sort of studying forever. And I think people should get going.
Yes.
And, and I think you really learn by making mistakes and not only by studying or like that. So make sure if you're studying, which is good, but make sure you're getting some practical practice of something and experience.
Right. So don't just stay in your head, surf, play tennis, try business in the real world.
That's right.
Yes. Wonderful. What makes you tick? The question, let me go to the specific. They said, what makes you tick at the moment? What's impassioning you now?
Oh, well, I'm still trying to make our businesses better.
Yes.
In general, and have these philanthropic efforts basically geared towards education. Like I said, making sure all Brazilian kids know how to read. I have 6 kids, 8 grandkids, and I'm very interested in what they're doing, how they're turning out, if I can help them somehow or another.
Right.
So, that keeps me busy.
Yes.
I have a good wife that keeps me busy also.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. What's your approach to getting things done? What is your approach to getting things done?
Well, like I said, figure out what is the important. What are the important objectives? Make sure you know what the objectives are. And then go for it and measure how you're doing. Are you getting there or aren't you getting there? And, I constantly joke that in Brazil, nothing works that well, but there are a few things that work reasonably well. And one is education in a small city in the northeast of Brazil, Ceará. The other is the Brazilian volleyball team. And the third one is our beer company.
Yes.
So these are...
They're all important, yes.
They're very different things.
Yeah.
But what do they have in common? They have very clear objectives. They have a total meritocracy. In other words, none of this cousin stuff. It's either the guy is good or not good. And they measure how they're doing very much. And all of them have somehow gotten the people around, the population around them, or like that, to help them out. In other words, in Sobral, people are very proud that Sobral is the best city in Brazil for public education and like that. And so you get the thing pushing in. So I think having very clear goals and measuring goals helps in getting anything done, And I'm always surprised that presidents of the country, I don't know what our 5 important goals are in Brazil. And I'm always wondering why our leaders are like that. Why don't they talk about this and have 5 goals and have the whole population come behind it? Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore was like that. He made sure that everybody in Singapore knew what the 5 basic objectives were, and then everybody worked towards that. And you look at Singapore. I mean, what results they achieved over the last 50 years and like that. So I'm surprised that leaders don't use that more.
Right, sort of clear, measurable goals, and to mobilize everyone toward those clear goals.
And make them be part of it.
Make them be part of it. That's one. Yeah, I think that's huge. A connected question: what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs in this room who want to grow a business? And if you could, based upon your experiences building businesses, the successes, the challenges that early on, in your failure with Ivy Leaguers, what have you learned about how to make a business grow that could be helpful advice for some of the young entrepreneurs in this room?
Well, I haven't figured out a way to do anything with a lot of effort.
Okay.
So you got to start off that, you know, whatever you do, and if you want to do it well, it will take a lot of effort. It's not very easy. And then,
But even, I don't mean to interrupt you, but even that seems critical. And some of us were talking about this last night at a dinner, how many of the people who are entrepreneurs and successful, like you, are into, I think it was Alina, we were talking about it, about sports. They're the marathon runners. They're the people who have great resolution. They are the people who've played at Wimbledon and played tennis and surfed the biggest waves. There's a certain kind of motivation and ambition that I feel you have had over the years. People might try to push down an idea, and you're going to say, no, I'm going to get up and I'm going to try and work and move forward and make this happen some way or another. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so.
So
yes.
effort's a big deal in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to have an effort, and I think sports has to do with it, because in sports you try hard, and and you measure how you're doing and like that. So it helps. But for entrepreneurs, you have to take some risks. Like I say, if you don't take a risk, that's a big risk.
Yes.
And you have to try things. And
Yeah.
you have to try things to do it slightly different. If you do it exactly like everybody else is doing, you're not gonna be special. So you got to try a little bit differently, from other. You got to innovate a bit, like that.
Yeah.
You have to attract the right people around you. You have to learn how to do that, how to live with different ideas and different people around you and make it all work together, like that. So, and measure all the time. Always measuring if you're making progress or not.
Got it. So the right people, clear objectives, rallying everybody around those objectives together, and measuring. Yes.
And a slightly different idea. If you try to do things exactly like everybody has done it, you're going to produce the same results, or you got to do it a little bit different.
Right. Two final questions. First, this is from another student. What's your big dream for the next few years? What's Jorge Paulo's big dream for the next few years?
Get all Brazilians being able to read is one. And we have had some problems in our larger companies recently. So there's improvement there, and that improvement means that we who built up these businesses and operated them in the past are not going to be able to operate them anymore, because we're getting older, and we have to create a system of working through boards and a different kind of governance than we had in the past when we were there and pushing things ourselves and like that.
Right.
So we have to learn this. It's possible. There are people similar to ourselves around the world who are doing a better job of governance of large corporations and varied interests better than we. So we have to learn from them.
Yes.
And learn how to do this, and move from being operators to creating a system where these companies can continue growing for as long as possible without our old presence of operating them and like that.
So continuing to adapt to the yes.
Yeah, so that's one of the goals, and
Yeah.
And, I want my family to be happy, and everybody being creative and trying new things. And a lot of potential candidates in the family.
Yes.
to do things and do things different and like that. So,
Let me close with that family. This was another question from the students. And I know we have a number of members of your own family here in this room. What wisdom do you want to pass along to your children, to your grandchildren, and beyond?
Try hard, work hard, be creative, do things in a slightly different way. And along the way, help the world get better if possible. I mean, help others and help the world be better. There are many ways you can do that. You can find your own way and like that. But I think trying to be successful and at the same time helping others be successful is the way to make the world better. So.
Every time that I speak with you, I am reminded that of my grandfather's philosophy, the impossible is just a little bit harder. I love your notion of dreaming big, and every time I'm with you, I am inspired to think big. And I think, and speaking for all of us in this room and all of those watching on social media, one message I hear is to dream big, to work to make things happen, and as a whole collective, things can really happen. Jorge, Paulo, it's such an honor to connect with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.